The day we set off was a really lovely sunny day. And I was out on my motorbike. It was my favourite thing to be doing. I was out in front of the convoy, and I thought, what could possibly happen? What harm could we come to? I mean, after all, we lived in a democracy, didn't we? I mean, I had no idea what was coming. Nobody did. Except, I think some of the people that survived Nostell Prior and stuff like that. These happened about a year ago. I think it was a year previous to that. I mean, they'd seen extreme police violence, and yeah, they believed it was coming. I was probably a mile ahead of the convoy, something like that. And I think I'm the only person that saw this roadblock. I think it was three tipper trucks across the road, not a wide road, they're quite narrow, and they'd all tipped, stand across the road, and a sea of coppers behind them. And I came around a bend and saw it, and realised exactly what it was, because it was about a mile from the last turn off, so it was a complete bottleneck for the whole convoy. Um, so I did a I did a 180 on my bike, which was my favourite way to get out of trouble. Shot back up the road, and it was immediately being followed by a police helicopter. It was so funny. I felt like I was in a James Bond film. I'm looking over my shoulder, and as I'm going down this country road, this chopper's chasing me. For what purpose, I don't know. But you'll know the police log said something like, they've got a motorcycle outrider, get the motorcycle outrider or stop him or something. Don't know how they're going to do that in a chopper. And I got back to the lead vehicle in the convoy, Phil the Beers truck, just as he reached that last turnoff. Told him what was down the road, and he turned left instead of carrying straight on, and the whole convoy went round and then did a right. So really we were going round a square. If you imagine the Beanfield was here, we turned that way and then down there. And the cops had run around the back from the roadblock, and really rather urgently, and just rammed the lead vehicles and smashed into everything and everybody, desperate to stop the convoy. Well, I saw violence in the vehicles in front, people being dragged out windows and stuff like that. And then people started to drive through the hedge into the Beanfield, for some kind of haven. Um, and then we all kind of amassed there by the people that had already been beaten up and dragged away. Um, and then it had the feel of a festival to it. It all went calm, and it was still a lovely day, and we were on a field. We were used to that, right? That's what we did, and I had the feel that it might become something alternative to getting to Stonehenge. Might be, didn't know. But I guess what we didn't know was the cops were busy building up their forces, getting ready to do what they ultimately did. And then the police ordered everybody to, I think, surrender, basically. Walk out of the field and give themselves up. I think by megaphone, maybe with the chopper, and also along the hedgerow and stuff like that. And they were dressed in full riot gear by that time, and ready for what they had clearly planned to do from the get-go. And then they entered the field and started smashing everything and everybody. No questions asked. It was just violence, unmitigated state violence against anything and everything in that field. And a few people jumped in vehicles and tried to kind of drive out. And from the field we were in, which is actually a grass field, there was a bean field kind of off to one side. And I saw a few vehicles heading that way. So I just joined the exodus up into the bean field. And it was quite a big field. And it's kind of surreal experience. I mean, the whole day was, but that was an extension of it, because there were vehicles circling the field looking for a way out, couldn't find a way out. There's a chopper overhead telling everybody to stop, what they're doing and that kind of stuff. And the police eventually got through the mass of people in the grass field and came into the bean field, and then started chasing vehicles. It was very weird. And when a vehicle would drive past the cops, they would throw things at the windscreen: rocks, helmets, shields, truncheons, that kind of stuff. They were off the hook. They didn't have to do that. They could have just waited, let things settle down. They could have done that at the beginning, in the grass field as well. They had no intention for a peaceful outcome. That was clear. And one by one, they stopped vehicles, dragged people out through broken windscreens and stuff like that. It was, I could see it as I was going. I was in such a small vehicle, I didn't catch their eye. Right, they were after the buses and things like that. And then at some point, some cop pointed at me and said, "Stop." And I thought, there ain't much else I can do. I stopped. He arrested me, which I expected, and that was fine. But he didn't hit me or anything. Some other cop came up while I was stood there, and he tried to stick his truncheon up my butt. Right. This is the nature of the beast. Right. I'm there peacefully with one cop arrested, and he comes to, kind of some kind of pseudo sexual violence on me. It's just, some of them were just animals. And then we got taken to all the police stations in the southwest, I think, or the southeast. I mean, they were full. We went for miles. Some of us went 100 miles to be in a holding cell. The group I was with, we were drugged. We were just laid out. It was in the water or something, but we were zonked for hours. The kind of thing they use in prisons, I think. Largactil, Philip B used to talk about that. And then they processed us, I think, in magistrate's court the next day or something like that. I'm not really sure. And they just let us go. Where we were, like miles away from where we had been and our homes and everything. Some people were barefooted, just. But people organised cars and went around, and there's a great kind of community spirit and effort to get everybody back together. And we all coalesced back at Savanac Forest, where you'll know this, where the police asked the owner for permission to come in and finish the job. It was kind of, it's kind of like sends shivers, that kind of mentality from the police. He refused. I think it was a traumatic experience. That's what I feel like this. Well, in the immediate aftermath, I noticed I was sleeping with one eye open, or actually I didn't notice, people around me did. They said it was really quite freaky because we had no vehicles, just sleeping around a campfire, one eye open. It was, it had been traumatizing, I guess. Got our vehicles back, all smashed to hell. It was quite crazy. And then we ended up at the White Horse not long after that. Short festival surrounded by cops. That kind of stuff. And anyway, a whole bunch of people that lived on the road set out to make their way to Spain. It was like our holy grail, where it was warm, you didn't need firewood, and wine was cheap, the sun shone. It sounded magical. So a whole bunch of people made their way there at different times. It took me a little while to get a truck together for the trip, and eventually, probably the following spring, just headed off to the ferry, caught a ferry to France, setting out to Spain like as before with nothing. Had a map, had one of those European maps, the big ones from a garage, and about 50 quid, and no number plates or insurance or stuff like that. We got stopped by French cops almost on the first day, and they couldn't believe it. They were like, no number plates. They were like, the state of us in our truck, and we said we were going to Spain. That made them feel better because we weren't going to be their problem. And then they insisted on knowing how much money we had, and we've got plenty of money, don't worry. And they insisted on seeing it, and so we got out our 50 quid, and they just laughed. I said, go to Spain. It was very funny. And we got there eventually. I learned to busk, learned to play the guitar, juggle, that kind of stuff. Moved around the south coast of Spain up into Portugal, hung out there for a little while. And eventually, I just got bored. 1 year in paradise, and I was just busting to actually do something, Got arrested as soon as I returned, which is funny. And then I was back in the scene. But I missed Stony Cross, which I think happened a year after the Battle of the Beanfield, so I wasn't there for that. I think the Public Order Act came out when I was at the start of my time on the road, and it was in direct response to groups of people, pulling up in fields and lay-bys and doing their own thing, and it became illegal to be in a group of people if the cops at the time thought so. Basically, they had that kind of that power to just call it that way. And I think a lot of people, climate protesters today, might think that this public order stuff is come for them, but as you say, it's a continuation of something that began in the early 80s, I would say. There was something in The Guardian many years ago. It was archives of Thatcher released many years after her death, and it was a speech that she wrote to give in Brighton. And in it, she named the unions and the travellers as the biggest enemies of the state. But she didn't give the speech because the hotel was bombed, and she clearly had to change the speech as a result of that. But what it shows me, is that this came from the very top. Thatcher identified the travellers as a threat to the state, and she brought the same coppers that trashed the miners to Stonehenge to do the same to the travellers. That's what that was. Travellers who were a proper threat to the order of things. People that said, look, I'm not going to stay in town and live without a job and be marginalised. I'm just going to jump in a vehicle and wander the country, right? With it's a funny thing when you first do that, because you don't actually have the right to be anywhere. And yet, here you are, on the road, stopping in lay-bys, stopping in fields, that kind of stuff. You don't have the right to be anywhere. You become an outlaw. Particularly, I think, because the way we were, the way we looked and dressed and that kind of stuff, there was hostility as well, not just from the police, that was omnipresent, but from local people. I was in a chip shop in Street once, and chips are my favourite food. And I got to the front of the queue, and the bloke looked at me and said, I'm not serving you, you're a traveller, or something like that. And I said to him, you got a chip on your shoulder? And he went like this. Like that, and the girl next to him just burst out laughing.
40 years on, I suppose, how does it feel 40 years later?
It was, I think, a major event in our country. It was a culture clash, and I think for me at least, the state exposed themselves for their true nature, what they're capable of, when they see you as the enemy. And we were the enemy of the state that day, and for years after, and that was a shocker. And in the same way that I'm aware in other protests, older generation people are shocked by how the police can behave, because they didn't think the police could ever be bad people. Same kind of thing, I suppose, to a degree, bigger degree in the Beanfield case. But you get a granny at a protest and you see the police do something bad, and it's like, well, surely not. This is Britain. Yeah, it is Britain, but it happens.